We are a body like Bruce. Welcome. We have for you today an article that we found in an old Inside Kung Fu magazine, and it's titled Slaying the Mythic Dragons of St. Bruce. Hype Shouldn't Protect the Real Bruce Lee by Jeff Pierce. Introduction by Roger Ward. The article that's about to be read to you is true, and unfortunately when it comes to articles on Bruce Lee that startling, and the author writes, as far as he knew, nobody had written an analysis of Bruce Lee based on the myths and facts of his life and presented in the materials his fans have greatest access to. These are documentaries, his movie, autobiography, and the words of his own wife in her book. What has emerged from this process is a good, clear look at a man whose reputation has been so manipulated by so many for so long that even his most ancient fans are often left quoting erroneous facts about their idol. There's too much myth-making in general in the martial arts. Unfortunately, the life of Bruce Lee is the grossest example. This article was inspired by a conversation between the author, Jeff Pierce, and this writer. They were discussing the latest documentary on Lee, the one on A&E's biography show. They began to compare to other ones they'd seen, in addition to the movie Dragon, Bruce Lee story, and Linda Lee Cadwell's own book. They both realised that amidst a huge load of hype and outright lies, there could be found a true, unadorned portrait of Bruce Lee. Sometimes it's not pretty, but no martial artist should be afraid to confront it. Kato could kick the Boy Wonder's butt. The Boy Wonder being Robin on the TV series Batman, i.e. Burt Ward. The producers of Batman and the Green Hornet had teamed up their heroes in one episode to boost ratings. Van Williams, the Green Hornet, recently told A&E's, probably at the time of this article being published, that in the original crossover script, Kato was supposed to lose to Robin. He says Bruce Lee walked off the show saying, "There's no way anybody's going to believe I would get in there and fight Robin and lose." The fight was changed to a draw. Of course, Bruce Lee was shrewdly right about his image, but he also had an ego. In that case, Lee is no better than any other star who wants to come off looking good. No one will believe I'd lose could be replaced with "none of my fans will love me if I say those lines." There is no denying Lee's charisma and his popularization of martial arts in North America. The stream of Lee material keeps on coming. 3 other documentaries by independent filmmakers were in production. Yet there's a very little critical analysis done of Lee himself. The canonization is complete. Look at the facts again, and one might get a less reverential perspective on the martial arts. James Dean. First of all, the party line is that Bruce Lee considered himself a martial artist first and actor second. Lee, however, wrote a very revealing pledge to himself in 1969. The text, as shown on biography and quoted in Linda Lee Cadwell's The Bruce Lee Story, reads in total, "I, Bruce Lee, will be the highest paid Oriental superstar in the United States. In return, I will give the most exciting performances and render the best of quality in the capacity of an actor. Starting in 1970, I will achieve world fame, and from then onwards till the end of 1980, I will have in my possession $10 million. Then I will live the way I please and achieve in harmony and happiness." The man who considered himself a martial artist first, badly wanted to be a rich superstar. He wanted to achieve inner harmony and happiness, $10 million worth. Nothing wrong with this, but we might question his priorities. And he actually achieved it. Probably through his life insurance policies, or just before his death. He achieved that $10,000 goal. The man who considered himself a martial artist first badly wanted to be a rich superstar. He wanted to achieve inner harmony and happiness, $10 million worth. Nothing wrong with this, but we might question his priorities. There is much talk about preserving the purity of Lee's martial arts ideas in Jeet Kune Do. Apparently, however, his life is fair game, and in the movie Bio Dragon, it is enhanced with ridiculous fiction. Lee is shown training as a little child, even though he actually started in his teens. Lee is shown proudly holding the published version of the Tao of the Jeet Kune Do, which was in fact not published until after his death. Perhaps the biggest cheat is the portrayal of his famous fight. Well, you can't do exactly, or else you get done for it, plagiarism or something like that, right? So, yeah, they had to exaggerate a bit. Perhaps the biggest cheat in the portrayal of his famous fight to keep Caucasian students Perhaps the biggest cheat is the portrayal of his famous fight to keep Caucasian students. In the movie, Linda is not told and argues with him about it later. Lee fights in an atmospheric stone chamber where his evil opponent gives up, then viciously injures him in the back. In life, Linda Lee Cardwell was there to watch the fight in Lee's school. She is a main source for the story and has told how the challenge scroll was presented to Lee, who called the Chinese fighters bluff right there. They wanted rules. Lee refused. The champion was almost apologetic beforehand, and in one moment of the fight turned and ran. This is still a pivotal moment for Lee on his road to Jeet Kune Do. Too bad we missed it in the movie. By the way, Lee did hurt his back. His wife tells us told them in the Bruce Lee story that Lee failed to warm up properly for weightlifting one day. It's in her book, the Bruce Lee story. Probably the man that I knew. When Lee got a black eye, he went into a rage. You may say it's only a movie. Some artistic license is allowed. But when Spike Lee made his film bio of Malcolm X, he knew that if he played fast and loose with the truth, African Americans would not forgive him. Bruce Lee doesn't get this kind of scrupulous effort. The makers of Dragon were too cynical to even rely on the natural drama of Lee's real-life fights. What about factual documentaries? Of 3 documentaries reviewed, along with the Bruce Lee story, the sin is usually one of deliberate interpretation to keep Lee as a hero. Lee himself admitted to being a teenage thug picking fights on the streets of Hong Kong. Cadwell writes that while training with Ip Man, Lee participated in secret sparring duels between Wing Chun advocates and other stylists. Martial arts had not rescued Lee from delinquency, only giving him a new arena for confrontation. So he used to wear school to go have fights, by the sounds of it. When Lee got a black eye in one encounter, he went into a rage and kicked his opponent in the eye and mouth, prompting a complaint to the police. Shortly after this, it was decided Lee should move to San Francisco. Yeah, because apparently this guy was Caucasian or something like that, and his father was important in Hong Kong. Supposedly. Well, that's what it says on that Dragon story. So his father shipped him over to America. Sent him to America. Shortly after this, it was decided Lee should move to San Francisco. Quite a different picture from Dragon, which has Lee flee Hong Kong after beating up villainous sailors. Yeah, very different. In this, his wife, Linda, accepts the role of apologist for him. She argues his delinquency has been exaggerated and is convinced he was much too intelligent not to have realised where to draw the line. Didn't he major in philosophy, etc.? But Lee didn't draw the line, his family did. Video bios of Lee already out, A&Es, the one produced by Golden Harvest and Curse of the Dragon, narrated by George Sulu Teko. Remember him? He was Sulu on the original 60s, 70s Star Trek. Maintains a mostly worshipped gaze at his career. To get an accurate picture, you really have to view them all. Golden Harvest, not surprisingly, has the best footage of Lee as a child movie star in Hong Kong. All deal in hype. In Curse, we are told Lee was a giant among men, a living legend, the greatest martial artist of the 20th century. Bruce Lee's personality back on his home turf was that of a bully. You might expect more biased reportage in Curse, since it was produced by Fred Weintraub, a co-producer of Enter the Dragon, and Bob Wall, one of its stars. Remember the guy with the scar? And Bruce Lee killed him. O'Hara. Surprisingly, some nasty elements of Lee's character are described. Paul Heller, another producer of Enter the Dragon, says by the time of the film Lee had gotten very cocky. He was strutting and wasn't as totally gracious as one would have hoped. Lee had to deal with the pressures of success and increasing challenges from martial artists in Hong Kong and also stuntmen, etc., wanting to test his skills. This doesn't quite get him off the hook for his behaviour. In the Bruce Lee story, an extra reports that as early on as the Green Hornet set, Lee was always showing people his muscles and how strong he was. Albert Goldman, author of The Deadliest Man on the Planet, says in the documentary Bruce Lee's personality when he was back on his own home turf and didn't have a lot of foreigners in America to deal with was that of a bully. He barked at people and pushed them around and threatened their lives. This person thought he was always playing the strong man to impress people. Well, somebody when he's younger says he's not a man, he'll never be a man, he's not man for that system. So he went hard out to be a man, right? In any way he could, shape or form. A story from Curse. Bob Wall had to use a real broken bottle in a fight scene for Enter the Dragon. Lee told Wall to come at him as fast as he could with the jagged edges, and on one spin Lee jammed his fist into the glass. When they finished the scene with Lee's hand treated, Lee sidekicked Wall so hard that he landed on a stuntman, breaking the man's arm. Wall calls it an unfortunate accident. What it sounds like is a martial artist who lost his temper and did not consider his partner's safety or anyone else's. Well, Wall had a different story. He came around the wrong way or something like that, and he cut Bruce on the hand or something. So that's a completely different story. But because Bruce Lee was Chinese, he had that reputation, that status, so he didn't want to look like a loser in front of all the other Chinese and stand-ins, etc. So apparently he had to gain his reputation back by killing Bob Wall. It was all hype, apparently. It's all could call it like a conspiracy theory, theory. He wasn't, according to Bob Wall, it wasn't like that, as far as we know. Wall calls it an unfortunate accident. What it sounds like is a martial artist who lost his temper and did not consider his partner's safety or anyone else's. Despite all this, the program tells us posters of Bruce hang in every martial arts school around the world. Not in mine. Anyone else? Well, we've got lots of them here on our wall. Apart from the hype on screen, there are the myths that flow from the lips of Bruce Lee fans everywhere. A Cheat Kune Do friend once told this writer was amazed how Bruce Lee actually practiced punching steel, as though this was some amazing feat invented by Lee. In this issue, you can read about Master Pan, who punches steel and learned that from his masters all well before Bruce Lee came on the scene. We have also seen old movie footage of Japanese masters punching the sides of steam engines well before Bruce Lee was born. If we're ever to get a new critical reappraisal of Lee's skills and his true place in the arts, one that compares him to what was out there and truly questions his ideas, we first need the Mortal Man. And didn't Jim Kelly talk about him and how he could beat anyone? He was the best, etc., etc. Many of his closest students said these things. We need to know how he really lived. We need less Dragon, or the Dragon Bruce Lee, sorry, And the sources from this article are Bruce Lee, the Legend, Curse of the Dragon, A&E's biography, Dragon Bruce Lee story, and the Bruce Lee story, the book by Linda Lee Caldwell, published by O'Hara. And about the author, Jeff Pierce is a writer, or he was a writer, martial artist and associate editor of CMAM. And then there's something here on Pierre Burton, with the lost interview with Bruce Lee. The life of Bruce Lee has some Canadian content. The author of The Last Spike managed to nail down the Little Dragon for an interview for the Pierre Burton show back in 1971 in Hong Kong. Burton told CMAM that Lee was very intense. When he made gestures, his arms moved very quickly, like they do in various martial arts, and would stop suddenly. There's no doubt at all he was cocky, and Burton liked him. He didn't find any of that unappealing, as you sometimes do in people who are that way. Burton has said he sold the rights to his interview in England, the US and Hong Kong. He told these people he's astonished at the whole Bruce Lee phenomenon that time, years after his death. Or right now, years after his death. He found Jason Scott Lee's performance in Dragon very like the Bruce Lee that he'd seen on his television show, his interview, but he didn't care much for that film's straying from the truth. Of course, Canada's famous historian is not the biggest martial arts film fan. On Enter the Dragon, it was alright. It was a typical martial arts movie, which is a hell of a lot of violence and not much plot. Not the kind of thing that I would pay too much money to see in the theatre.